Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. Get early access to Sleep Number's biggest sale of the year. 25% off the i8 bed, our most popular. Plus free home delivery. Limited time. All Sleep Number smart beds offer temperature solutions for your best sleep. Check it out at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com today.
Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
A magic beyond anything you could ever imagine.
You are now listening to the Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Sagrera Farms on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Locking down the middle of the day.
You really think that's the best idea?
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
It's quite a piece of work.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from Mercedes-Benz at Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. Means we're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Fired up with us. You're right here working towards the weekend. A lot of folks went back to school today, so if you're a parent celebrating that, appreciate you hanging out with us. You might be headed to the carpool line a little bit later on. So we'll get you there and we'll get you through to the end of the work week. Got a busy 2 hours coming up here on this Thursday. Luke Johnson from sunny SoCal coming up in 15 minutes. We'll meet the freshman a little bit later on in the show. Matthew Bruni from On 3 is going to be with us at 2 o'clock. Andrew Hutchison, best of Arkansas sports, talking some Arkansas Razorbacks at 2:30. So lots and lots and lots to get to here on this Thursday. Let's crank it up the way we do every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
I was perusing the internet earlier today, just kind of looking for some things that piqued my interest, and ESPN came up with another annual piece here today. They do this yearly. They ranked all 136 teams into some tiers in college football. And I think that it's an interesting feature, and I think it's written in an interesting way this year. David Hale handled it for ESPN, and he pieced it out starting with Tier 1A, which is what he believes to be the two best teams in college football who just so happen to be playing in the opening game in college football. That's Ohio State and Texas. These are two teams that have recruited at an insanely high level. Arch Manning's got a ton of fanfare with him. Ohio State's at home in that game. They're defending national champions. I don't have a lot of pushback on those two teams being the best in college football. I would probably, by default, put Georgia in that group. He did not, but he put Georgia, Oregon, and Penn State in 1B, and he determines those to be the 5 best teams in college football. Penn State's getting a lot of love. It helps when you got Drew Aller back, and James Franklin's done a good job there. I would still contend you're missing a big win. I'm just not going to give you a lot of credit for what you did in those 2 playoff games last year. Those 2 teams weren't any good that you played. Boise State's not good. SMU's not good. I'm not going to come off of that. I'm not going to make a different opinion formed based on the fact that they had some guys, like, they're not good. They're not at the level that Ohio State and Michigan the last few years and Georgia and Alabama the last few years and Clemson, like, they're just not. So you don't get credit for me, Hunt Paul, and I'm not suggesting James Franklin is hustling to get my approval, but it's my show, and I'm talking about what I think about these rankings, and Penn State's not there for me just yet. But Georgia and Oregon have recruited at an insanely high level. Lanning has taken that blueprint from Athens and taken it up to Eugene. They've got a treasure trove of NIL money while Phil Knight's still signing checks, and I think that they're among the best teams in college football for sure. So you got those top 5, Penn State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State. That's what ESPN deems here to be the top of the top. And then you go into tier number 2. And this is where you find LSU. And they are grouped in with a tier that is labeled playoff expectations. It's LSU, it's Clemson, it's Alabama, Miami, Michigan, and Notre Dame. So LSU and Alabama are the only 2 SEC teams in this tier, but you're talking about national brands here. And what stuck out to me as I look at that group of 6 teams is that these are generally teams over the last 4 years that have recruited at a top 10 level. Like, Bama's always going to recruit at that level. Like, they had the weird deal where Saban retired past the signing period and got transfer portal windows, and guys like Caleb Downs, who generally would never leave Alabama, are leaving. But they've got 5 stars in this class, and like Bama's going to recruit at an elite level for sure. Dabo Swinney doesn't use the transfer portal like everybody else, but he still gets a bunch of really good players in the high school ranks. Miami, with the money they're throwing around with the Life Wallet folks and South Beach and throwing around Lamborghinis and Mario Cristobal, who's always been a very good recruiter. I don't think he's a very good coach, but very good recruiter. Yes, absolutely. Michigan has recruited well. Now, Jim Harbaugh's not there anymore, and that hurts, but they've recruited very well. And then Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman has recruited at a higher level than they did under Brian Kelly. I don't think that's very arguable. Well, you can just suggest whether or not you think that Marcus Freeman is capable of taking Notre Dame beyond where Brian Kelly did, and he hasn't to this point. And I guess to do that, you'd have to win a national championship. But the recruiting is very, very good. And you've got LSU, who's recruited at an elite level. I don't have to tell you that. You already know that. The thing about these programs, as I look at them in this list this year, because this is not a list of programs and a forecast of 5 years. We're looking at 3 months, 4 months here. I look at Alabama. They're in flux at quarterback. We think it's Ty Simpson. Can Keelan Russell come in and win that job as a 5-star freshman? We'll see. But they're in flux at quarterback. Miami just lost the number 1 pick in the draft at quarterback. You believe in Carson Beck? I don't know that I do. He's there. Michigan, we know their quarterback situation down here in Baton Rouge. It's impossible for me to do this segment without sounding like sour grapes, but I promise that's not the intent here. I'm just suggesting that if you want to put Bryce Underwood in there and suggest that he fixes all of Michigan's passing problems, and Michigan was probably the worst team in the Power 5 last year in terms of a passing offense. Statistically, they were, and I think they just were, period. They could not complete a forward pass last year. It was utterly atrocious. Their quarterbacks were terrible. Sharon Moore was the head coach and calling the offense. It was awful. And so if you think Bryce Underwood's just going to fix all of that, I think that's ambitious. Again, it sounds like sour grapes. I look at elite teams across the country, and I look back over the course of the last decade or so, and you start talking about true freshman quarterbacks that have been that sort of revelation immediately. And like I can give you Trevor Lawrence, who was sensational, and that Clemson team was so good. And as a freshman, they went out to Santa Clara and they beat the brakes off of Alabama 44-16. And that Trevor Lawrence team, when he was a true freshman, like their defense allowed 12.3 points per game when he started. 12.3 points per game. And Michigan's been good on defense. That's true. They've recruited really well there, and they put a ton of defensive linemen and linebackers in the NFL. And maybe they'll be that good on defense this year. And their schedule is very manageable. But that's a lot to ask of a true freshman quarterback to just be the complete elixir for an atrocious unit. We'll see. And then you've got Notre Dame, who's moving on at quarterback as well. Now, I watched Notre Dame at the end of last year, and I was like, this team with Riley Leonard, like their passing game's terrible. Their defense is very good. Jeremiah Love, awesome, running the ball. They always have good offensive linemen, but their quarterback's not great. So I'm not suggesting that that's as big a transition. But the point I'm making here with pointing out that Alabama's in flux at quarterback, and Miami's in flux at quarterback, and Michigan's in flux at quarterback, and Notre Dame's in flux at quarterback, and that leaves 2 teams in Tier 2 that are not in flux at quarterback. Well, who are those teams? LSU and Clemson. If you are a college football fan, not an LSU fan, not a Clemson fan, a college football fan, you are getting absolute must-see TV the first weekend, because the first 2 teams on this list are Ohio State and Texas. They're playing in the shoe, 11 a.m. Central Time on opening Saturday. And then you fast forward 6-7 hours and you get LSU and Clemson in Clemson, South Carolina on opening weekend. And I would suggest the loser of Ohio State, Texas is still in reasonable shape. You feel like with those schedules, with those rosters, you can survive that. You've lost to what will be the number 1 team in the nation that first Monday. The winner of that game is going to be number 1 in the country the first Monday. I think we can all agree on that, right? And I think Clemson's okay if they lose to LSU in that first game. It is a home game, but they've got an ACC schedule to manage, and I think they probably can. And that's mentioned here in this article with this tier list. So that inherently suggests, if you go by this logic that I've laid out, if you got the 2 biggest games And I think the loser of Ohio State, Texas in the shoe is okay. And I even think Clemson can survive a home loss against LSU. Wouldn't that suggest that LSU is under the most pressure in all of college football the first regular season Saturday of the season? Isn't that what I'm saying? That's just how I read this story. And I read this article, and it says LSU hasn't won an opener since 2019. Clemson's lost 3 of his last 4 openers. Something's got to give when these two teams face off in week 1. Clemson can probably survive a defeat, even if Dabo Swinney's critics will believe that the chorus once again that he's past his prime. But LSU will have a much tougher time recovering with a schedule that includes Florida, Ole Miss, South Carolina, A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. Brian Kelly's head exploding with fire like the red guy in Inside Out. I don't get the reference. I don't know what Inside Out is. Should at least provide some entertainment if things go south in Baton Rouge. Well, that just warms my soul, doesn't it? I mean, I think we all already knew this, but it just keeps being reinforced time over time over time over time. Whether it's being at SEC Media Days and talking to people who don't cover LSU and are just talking to us about that game. Whether it's sitting with the local media before practice. Whether it's reading an athletic piece that ranks the teams 1 through 136, whatever it is. Or whether it's doing a tier list on ESPN or whatever the case may be. Every time I pull something up, it just reinforces the fact that, man, there's a lot that rides on this game. And I mentioned this a couple times, I'm not in the T-Bob camp when he was still here and he was talking about that game and essentially talking about this season, said if you can't get it done this season, you'll never get it done. And I'm not built to go out on that type of a limb. I'm built more to be a little bit even keel, not be too far up, not be too far down. And I think you can recover from a season opening loss. I said it last year. It's the same drill. If you beat Louisiana Tech the next week and then you come back and win a home game against Florida, then all of a sudden you can get things cooking a little bit. You can beat Arkansas and you can set up some big-time games like LSU did with the Ole Miss game last year. When you beat Ole Miss at home last year, everybody's looking at this going, okay, they're okay. They're fine. It was bad they lost in Vegas, but they went to South Carolina and won. No matter how it happened, they did it. And they just beat a top 10 Ole Miss team. So, okay, now things are starting to move in the right direction. And you crushed Arkansas, and then you got to A&M, and you were undefeated in the league. So it can be done. But that doesn't, to me, completely strip away just how massive and just the magnitude of this LSU-Clemson game in the opener. It's reinforced every time I read any national publication. Kickoff magazines, ESPN stories, whatever it is. It's always there. It's going to be a big one when it comes to LSU and Clemson that Saturday night in South Carolina. I always want to say Death Valley because I'm not offended by saying Death Valley. I can call Clemson Stadium Death Valley, and I don't think that invalidates LSU's home field advantage for some reason. But I also get the sense that if I say that repeatedly on these airwaves, the listenership's going to go, oh, you think that's the real Death Valley? That's great. You're such a negative guy. I think there can be two. I think it's fine. I think if you say Death Valley to someone who's outside of those two fan bases, they will immediately point to Baton Rouge, and I'm fine with that. I don't think Clemson plays in a JV stadium that stole our name and they stink. I think they've got a stadium they call Death Valley, and I'm kind of okay with it. I can call them both that. But I'm not going to do that intentionally because I don't want to irritate you, the listener. I'll just call it in Clemson, South Carolina. I don't even know what the stadium's called. I think it's maybe Memorial Stadium. I'm not sure. But I'm not going to go ahead and... Maybe Jack Trice? Did that just pop in my head? Is there a chance that that's what it's called?
Memorial Stadium.
It's Memorial. Okay, what's Jack Trice Stadium?
That's Iowa State, I think.
Okay, why that is so odd that would... Yeah, it is Iowa State. Why would that have popped in?
I don't know.
Odd. Some things happen on live radio. All right, our Thursday shows are brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. I can't wait to tell you about this. I got a text from my guy, Sean Sagrera, earlier this week. He is fired up. Y'all know I've told you over the last few months about the scale in which beef is graded on, right? If you go 0 to 3% intramuscular fat score, you're talking about select. If you get 3 to 8%, you're talking about choice. If you get to 8 to 9%, you're talking about prime Angus beef. That's what you get at the finest steakhouses, prime. And that's a 9 on the intramuscular fat score. Here's some of the cows that Sean has on his farm right now. 20.1. That's almost 3 times what you need to be prime. 19.9. 17.03. 17.8. 17.75. 15.11. You get the point. It's not just one cow. This is a group of cows. I'm counting north of 20 cows that they've got ultrasounded on the farm at Sagrera Farms, and the average is 13.08. The average. And prime is 8 or 9. This is the highest quality beef you're going to find in the country, and it's right outside Baton Rouge. So the question is, well, how do I get it? Well, it's easy. You just got to call Sean. You got to call Sean. You got to say, hey, I heard about these animals that you've got on the farm right now, and I'm interested in getting quarter, side, whole cow for my freezer so that I can have ribeyes, fillets, flanks, skirts, strips, chuck roasts. He sent me a picture of a chuck roast they found. It looks like a ribeye. It's marbled so incredibly. It's some of the finest beef you will find, and it's right here just outside Baton Rouge. So call Sean, 225-719-1723. Again, that's 225-719-1723, and get your hands on some of the finest beef in the country just outside Baton Rouge at Sagrera Farms. Right outside Baton Rouge. They bring our Thursday shows every single week. Step aside, go to Southern California. Luke Johnson, that's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Chugging along here on a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. I have Luke Johnson from sunny Southern California here shortly. Still got a lot to do over the course of the next hour 40 or so. We'll have Matthew Bruni coming up, and also Andrew Hutchison talking to us from Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm checking my weather app currently here in Baton Rouge. I've got a real feel. That can't be right.
104?
It says 112.
I don't know about that.
It says 92, real feel 112. I'm assuming that's not the case in Los Angeles, although they do have some heat waves. Luke, can you confirm? Is it 112 there?
Sure isn't, my man. I went for a 3.5 mile run this morning, and I don't think I broke a sweat until like mile 3. I was like, this is not fair. This is not fair that people get to live in this.
You gonna come back?
And yeah, like, you know, I do have like a kid at home. I don't want to be a complete dirtbag. I do love her, but like, you know, maybe they could just come out here.
They could.
We just stay.
There are airplanes. They can make that happen.
Cover the things from 1,200 miles away or whatever.
We'll see. Well, I'm jealous. I hope that's it's an enjoyable weekend for you there. Give me the schedule for the Saints and what they're trying to get accomplished out there. Yeah,
so they actually like switch things up a little bit, and for context, like during the time out in Metairie, they're practicing early in the morning. You're practicing around 9 a.m. And obviously there's like weather considerations in that, right? It's not as hot that early in the day. They can get some good work in, and then they take a break, and they do walkthrough in the afternoon. And here, since we've already discussed that the weather is just like obnoxiously good. They just change it up, and they're doing their walkthrough in the morning, taking their breaks and team meetings, and then they're doing practice late. So they're not going to be practicing here until like 6 p.m. Central Time, which is not great for a guy who really wants to go see Scherzer and Kershaw tomorrow night in Dodger Stadium. Not going to happen because they're not going to be wrapping up practice till like 7:30 tomorrow night after first pitch. But sacrifices for the job.
Yeah, you can't have all the wins. You can't get every win. Just take a couple of wins. Take your weather win at the moment.
True.
All right, let's talk some black and gold. I'm curious your thoughts on the offensive line, and I want to start with the tackles because they're both new at their various positions. What have you seen, even though they haven't had pads on too long?
Yeah, I really like what I've seen. I think they're going to be a good offensive line this year. I don't know if they're going to be great. Like, there are going to be some rough patches for this group, I think, particularly in pass protection, right? Like, they'll be more good than great in pass protection, I think. But like 1 through 5, I feel really good about where they're at. I mean, more so than I have at any point since like Teron Armstead left the team. Right, and they had a really great offensive line back in the late 2010s, and that fueled a lot of their success. So I think one of the things that, like the way I'm approaching this team, I really like their coaching staff. I think Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley are both really bright coaches. That sets a higher floor for a team. And I really like their offensive line, which I think sets a floor for the offense. I'm not out here saying they're going to light the world on fire, but like I don't think it'd be hard for me, even with their quarterback issues, for me to see this just being like a complete disaster for them, because I think their line's going to be good. And I think Banks has just stepped in right away and done everything you want a top 10 pick to do. I think Fuaga's looked really just smooth and natural on the right side. I think Penning has looked good at guard. And then, you know what you're getting out of McCoy and Ruiz. I just think there's a lot of talent on this line, and they're playing like it. So that to me is a really good sign for this team, even if it doesn't mean anything necessarily for this year outside of just being that floor setter. I think this is something you can really build upon with what they've got going on here.
So by your eye, have they given Rattler and Shook enough time to get the reps that they need? It's tough to evaluate a quarterback who's running for his life all the time. Have they been able to run an offense and give you a good evaluation of what those quarterbacks can do when afforded some time?
The first team, yeah. I don't think I would say the same thing about the second and third team, which is that's part of this, right? Like offensive line depth, I think, is a concern for 32 NFL teams. But for some, it's a bigger concern than others. And, I thought going into this camp that the Saints had maybe shored up some of their weaknesses there. Will Clapp has had a really hard time snapping the football. It's been weird. There's been a lot of low snaps, which has contributed to a lot of bad plays for the second, third team offense. I think their backup tackle play has been really, really inconsistent. Dylan Radins, who they signed, to potentially be their starting guard, before the whole Trevor Penning, Kelvin Banks thing happened. I think he's been solid, but they've been moving him out to tackle, and trying him out there to see if he could be their swing tackle, because I think Landon Young struggled. The first team, yes, I think I have seen what they can look like operating an offense, because they're playing behind a functional line, but the second and third teams not so much. And part of this is, I think Staley's got a really creative scheme, and I think he's really getting a lot out of these defensive linemen. And they're making life hard on them. But I think you've got to consider the other possibility that the second, third team lines just aren't very good right now.
And that's probably the case with most camps in the NFL. You're not going to be able to field 10 good offensive linemen. They're just not available. So that's really every team every year is looking for offensive line depth this time of year. So let's talk about the preseason game on Sunday. What do you think Kellen Moore is looking to accomplish in this thing?
Well, I think first and foremost, they're going to be sitting some starters. We already know Alvin Kamara is not going to play, and I think that's just a sign that we're probably going to see a lot of these guys who are really important cogs, especially guys who've been dealing with injuries, not play. So that would, to me, that'd be like Eric McCoy, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan with their age, maybe Chase Young, guys who are going to be the guys they're counting on this year. I don't think we'll see them, but they've got to have some semblance of an offense out there, to me, because the most important thing they're doing right now is evaluating the quarterbacks. Yep. I just can't see a world where you're all right, Spencer Rattler, I'm assuming, by the way, he's going to start the game. It'd be really hard for me to be Spencer, go out there and show us what you can do. You have none of your players. Yeah. And then Tyler, show us what you're going to do. You have the backups to none of the players. I think they're going to have some guys out there who are contributors, because they've got to see what these quarterbacks can do. This is a really important evaluation for them, and they got to see what the running backs can do. They've got 4 guys who are legitimately in a competition for the number 2 spot, which I think is going to be really important this year. They've already talked about how they can't just every game go out there and count on 25, 30 touches from Alvin Kamara like they have been the last couple of years. They got to be more efficient with his workload. They got to have somebody who can take some of it off his plate. I think they feel good about what they have. but like they don't really know until these guys get in like a live contact setting. So we're going to see a lot of like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cam Akers, Kendra Miller, Marcus Yarns, Bayless Jones. All guys who I think have a legitimate case for making the roster. But like, I don't think any of them has like truly said, I'm going to be the guy who's splitting carries with AK.
And to me, like, some preseason stuff's really boring. This Sunday game for the Saints is fascinating to me. And I haven't said that for many preseason games. Do you feel the same way that, like, this is not like we're trying to figure out who the last four guys on the roster are. We're trying to figure out, like, some real things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, also, like, I think it's going to just provide some necessary context for us as people who are invested in the Saints and interested in how this is going to shake out this year. Because all we've seen so far with this like completely new regime and a completely new way of doing things is like what they're doing against each other. And like, I'm going to be honest with you, like I've come away from, whatever it's been, 11 training camp practices, something like that. And I've felt like 1 through 53, they're better this year than they were last year. I think and the reason I feel that way is because I think they've got smart coaches who are taking advantage of the players' best traits and getting more out of them. But like, am I going to feel that same way after watching them go up against like the Chargers backups? I don't know. Like, I think it's going to be an important context for us because everything's new. So, I'm really, really super interested in this. We'll see if I still feel the same way for preseason week 2. Like, that's always like when you're like, oh crap, like more like fake football.
Yep.
But I think I'm really, really fascinated to see how this is going to play out on Sunday.
Tell them where they can find all your stuff while you're out there in SoCal.
Yep, you can read everything we do over at NOLA.com, and we'll be keeping up with our video stuff as well. I think we're doing a virtual podcast tomorrow, so you can just search for Saints Insider anywhere you find your podcast. You can check it out on YouTube as well. I think it's just under Saints Insider there.
On Twitter @by Luke Johnson as well. Enjoy Southern California. For safe travels back, we'll talk next week.
Certainly will, buddy. See you soon.
Luke Johnson with NOLA.com, covering the black and gold. I've said it like 5 times. I'll say it a lot over the next 2 days. Like, I'm locked in on Sunday. I can't wait to watch what this Saints team looks like. I realize that it's a preseason game. I realize there's some vanilla stuff. I realize you're going against backups. I realize there are a lot of backups out there, but there's real stuff to watch in this preseason game. And trust me, especially like during the Breeze era and even in the Carr era where he didn't play, like, you're watching a lot of stuff that really doesn't matter in preseason games. And there will be plenty of stuff that doesn't matter on Sunday, but there will be plenty of stuff that does, and that's a bit of a change. So I'm excited to look at that. We'll talk more about Saints and Chargers as we move forward over the next 2 shows here on the Hunt Palmer Show. Our Thursday show is brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. There is one aspect of this LSU football team that we have not really talked about at all since they started practice. I'll do that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Already made the decision. Sunday night, Cubs-Cardinals, Sunday night baseball on ESPN. Steak night for me. Got Sagrera Farms in the freezer. Going to go with the New York strip that I got in there. And I'm looking very much forward to that. If you're looking for the finest in beef, check out my guy Sean Sagrera and Sagrera Farms. They bring you our Thursday shows every single week. All right, we have. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, Showdown on the Mound. That should be a good one.
Showdown and a steak. That's a heck
great.
Of a
yeah, that's a nice little
heck of a Sunday.
Yeah.
If they win. If they lose, it'll be a great steak, and I'll be furious. But that's just how it goes. I'm at the point now where I'm struggling to like brush off the games.
It's not easy.
In May, I'm fine. In August, and then next month, I'll just be inconsolable. It'll just be, it's awful, but I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. Glad they're in the mix. 3rd best record in baseball, 4 games out of the division. That is garbage. And that's been my TED Talk for the Cubs today. All right, let's talk about one aspect of LSU we haven't talked about really at all. Like, I've talked about offensive line a ton, defensive line a ton. We've mentioned the linebacking core. We've talked about the safety rotation. I like the corners. They're coming along pretty well. I like the running back, especially at the top. Nussmeier's a proven commodity, wide receiver depth for days. Love the way they've got it tight in. I don't think they're missing a beat. I've talked about this team in every which way you can talk about them, really, from going out there, except one. Not a lot of special teams talk. Not a lot of special teams talk to this point. Well, let's talk some special teams, shall we? We got a chance to watch some punting back middle last week. And if you recall this, last year at this time, we watched Peyton Todd and Blake Oxendorf go out there and punt. And we watched them punt probably a total of 15 balls. And everybody in the media just kind of looked around on the sideline and were like, they can't punt. And it was awful last year. There were shanks, inability to pin teams deep, lack of hang time. It just was not good from a punting perspective last year. I wouldn't submit that they got gashed in the return game, but they just were not an effective team in terms of their punting average. And that's something that LSU has been good at over the years. And that just kind of went away. You were dead last in the SEC at 39.5 yards per punt. That's awful. You got to be better than that. Now, it's not the most important thing in the world because Vanderbilt was the best in the league at it last year. So, take that for what it's worth. But they got to be better. So they go into the transfer portal to add to their punting situation, and they get Grant Chadwick. And we watched Grant Chadwick punt last week. And first of all, he's really long in range. He's 6'5", 205 pounds. And I'm no punting expert, but I can tell when you hit it really high and it spirals. And that's what we're looking for, right? You don't necessarily want to kick it 75 yards because you need somebody to get on there and cover it. But high and turning over is what I'm looking for. And you saw that from Chadwick consistently. He also did a little bit of practice doing a 3 steps to the right and an end-over-end kick that you're going to use, try to maybe get the ball on the ground a little bit more quickly. But he was doing what was asked of him. And he's a sophomore who had a really good year at Middle Tennessee last year. He averaged 43.4 yards per punt, which is 5 yards better than LSU did last year. So I think that you're talking about a guy who should be an upgrade at the position at punter. I was in Lafayette today, in Lake Charles today, the Southwest Louisiana ESPN affiliates, and they were kind of asking, like, are we sure that Damian Ramos is like the guy, or is there like competition for him? And I was like, he's the guy. I mean, Aaron Burrell's out there, and Aaron Burrell has a huge leg, but Damian Ramos is an established dude. You're talking about a guy who right now is number 6 all time with 45 field goals made. You're talking about a guy who's number 5 all time in attempts. He's 7th all time in percentage in LSU history at 78% makes. He's 4th on the all-time scoring list. Until the Texas Bowl, he had made 129 straight point after touchdowns, extra points. He's been very good. He's got 3 games with multiple 40-plus yard field goals to his name. He did that 3 times last year against Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Florida. He's very good. And I don't have any problem with him. I don't know if he's a surefire NFL guy. If you wanted to go back and give me Cade York, I'd take him. But Damian Ramos has done a really good job as LSU's kicker, and I anticipate he'll do that again this year. And then you get to the last phase here, which is the return game. And this is something that has irked me over the years with LSU. I feel like there's been too many guys that they put back there as possession returners. Just make sure you catch it. And you know what? 2 years ago, when you got Jaden Daniels, fine. Don't even put a returner back there. I don't care. 2019, I don't need a returner back there. Do whatever you want. Burrow and Daniels, they'll go right down the field, score a touchdown, I don't care. But for the most part, when you have a human offense instead of a robot offense, which LSU had in 19 and 23, I'd like somebody back there that can change the game. Somebody back there that can ignite the crowd. Somebody back there that can make something happen. And when you're at LSU and you're raking in 4 and 5 stars from all over the place that are dynamic with the ball in their hands, I'd like somebody back there that can make a play. And finally, last year, they did that. And Xavier Thomas was really good early in the season and finally busted one in the Texas Bowl. Aaron Anderson filled in for him against Oklahoma and busted one. Those were big-time plays in those games. You had to have them. And that's the type of impact I'm looking for from kick returners and punt returners at LSU. And you look around this list, this is as diverse a menu as you've had with guys that can make plays. Barian Brown has 5 kickoff return touchdowns in his SEC career. That's the most all time. It's tied for the most ever. Xavier Thomas has returned kickoffs for touchdowns against A&M, Baylor. Those 2 guys are proven kickoff returners. Then you've got Aaron Anderson, who can absolutely do that as well. And I would submit that if you want to throw Chris Hilton back there, fine by me. He's the fastest of the lot, I think. So they've got legit game changers that they can put back for punt return and kickoff return, and I want that. I realize we're now in a time where guys can kick the ball out of the end zone pretty routinely. I get that. So kickoffs are a little bit devalued, but you made it happen last year. So I'm pro game changers back there. I realize there's some risk if they're a little bit shaky with their hands, and muffed punts are a good way to lose football games. It's a 65-yard field position issue that is game-changing, and I don't want that to happen. But I'm not willing, like LSU a couple of years ago was putting walk-ons back there. Now, they had issues catching the ball, and Malik couldn't catch it, and Besh muffed one, and I got it. But I don't need a walk-on back there. I got dudes that are going to play in the NFL for 5 or 8 years. Put them back there. And I think that's what you're going to see from this LSU team this year. I'm excited about the entirety of the special teams unit. I think they've got a good punter. I know they've got a steady kicker, and I know they got explosive dudes that can go back there and return kicks. So to me, this should be a strength for LSU, absolutely. And to me, special teams should always be a strength at LSU. So I'm fired up about what they can potentially do with this group on special teams. It's just the one aspect of this team that I just don't think we've really spent any time on. I wanted to do that here on this Thursday. We'll come back and close it out with Meet the Freshman. That's hour 1 on the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. Every car that's on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. What a line of vehicles. Awesome, awesome line of vehicles at Genesis of Baton Rouge. And as I say most days, like, if you're driving around listening to me right now, the odds are you have not been behind the wheel of a Genesis. They're just a new vehicle. And if you've been loyal to the same brand for the last 15 years, like a lot of people are, like, you haven't gotten behind the wheel. Give them a shot. Put it on your list. If you're just curious, go see them. Talk to one of their sales staff. Say, hey, I heard about you on Hunt Show. I'd love to get behind the wheel and test drive. They'll do it for you right there on the lot. They'll also come to you. If you're at work, you're going, it's hard for me to get away. I'm across town. I've got 45 minutes at lunch. Can y'all come and just let me see what the GV80 drives like? Let me see what the GV70 drives like. They're happy to come to you. They'll drive right up, get you behind the wheel, spin around your neck of the woods, whether that's your home or your office, and let you see the difference. You'll feel the comfort, style, all the bells and whistles, and you'll know, because every model in the line is an IHA top safety pick, that you're driving one of the safest cars on the road. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Go see them at Airline at Pico. GenesisofBatonRouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
All right, closing out hour number 1 here. We'll get to Matthew Bruni talking LSU football practice coming up in 10 minutes to start hour number 2. But we're going to finish the hour the way we've been doing that the last couple of weeks with our Meet the Freshman series.
Meet the Freshmen. Freshmen. Meet the Freshmen. They're the newest Tigers on the team.
I think in this class, like, you look at the 5 stars and you look at the guys that are probably the most recognizable. Harlan Berry comes to mind, certainly, as a guy that's just been a quote-unquote famous recruit. But if you look at the two guys we're going to talk about in this class today, 2 of the more recognizable names in this class, really because of other people, but hopefully they make a name for themselves here at LSU. The first I want to talk about is Keelan Moses. Certainly, most of you very, very familiar with Keelan and his family. Dylan Moses, his older brother, U-High superstar, was a very, very, very famous recruit for 4 years before he went to Tuscaloosa, played linebacker for the Tide. Keelan decided to stay home. I think that there were some thoughts that maybe A&M was in the picture late, but Keelan decided there to stick with his commitment, where he committed very early, and come to LSU, stay home at LSU, essentially, for a U-High kid. You're looking at his on-3 ranking, number a 3-star recruit. 24/7 has a 4-star recruit, number 13 in the state of Louisiana. ESPN has a 4-star. Rivals had him a 4-star, top 10 player in the state of Louisiana. I'll tell you this with Keelan. He's got good size on him. He's 6'2". He's let me see what LSU lists him at. I'm looking at the recruiting profile, but I think LSU lists him a little bit bigger. Yeah, 222 pounds. So you're talking about a freshman that's got real size, and you can see that when you go out and watch him. I've watched a lot of the young linebackers to this point. There are 5 freshman linebackers in this class, and Zach Weeks is the biggest of the bunch. Charles Ross is the fastest of the bunch, but Keelan Moses is a very big and physical kid, and you see that when he's out there. He actually made a great play in the first Shells practice we were at in 7-on-7. He dropped back, undercut a route. It didn't catch it. He hit him right in the hands. It would have been a pick 6, but he made a really good instinctive play. It's just a really athletic family, and he's a really athletic kid. These freshman linebackers are in a very advantageous spot. They can sit back and watch Whit Weeks, who's an all-conference, all-American type player. They can watch Wes Weeks, who's in his 5th year in college and has played a ton of football. Devon Keys is just 1 year removed from being right where they were. You got Harold Perkins there as well, who's been a star and has played great linebacker. And these guys can learn from them right in front of them, and then they're all leaving. Like, Harold Perkins gone. Whit Weeks gone. West Weeks gone. Like, Devon Keys will still be there, but you're in a situation where you can ease in, put on some weight, learn the scheme, and then it's showtime to go try to play next year. And I think Keelan Moses absolutely falls into that mold. So I don't think a lot for Keelan Moses this year, but I like his size. I love his athleticism, and I like the spot these young freshman linebackers are in. So Keelan Moses, the first freshman of the day, 6'2", 222-pound linebacker from U-High. The second, and I said they were recognizable names, is Zion Williams. Not Zion Williams' son, but Zion Williams. And Zion Williams is a big dude. Bo Davis saw him, recruited him, got him signed before he left for the Saints. And this is the big, prototypical Bo Davis inside player. You see Sydir Mitchell, who's in that mold, who he brought to Texas and then brought to LSU. You see Zion Williams is in that mold here at LSU as a freshman. He is 6'4", 360 pounds. He is a big, big dude. And he wasn't extremely highly recruited. You're talking about a guy that was a 3-star by On3, a 3-star by 24/7 Sports. ESPN and Rivals gave him 4 stars. ESPN.com thought he was the number 28 player in the state of Texas, number 17 interior defensive lineman in the country. Rivals thought he was number 21 in his position, top 40 in the state of Texas. But he's a big dude. And I'm curious how Kyle Williams will use these guys. And I think we will get our answer with how he deploys Jacobian Guillory and Sydir Mitchell this year. I know what he's going to do with Ahmad Bro. I know what he's going to do with Bernard Gooden, and I feel pretty good about what he's going to do with Dominic McKinley, who's a little different skill set. He's 6'6", 306. That's just not the same body type as Zion Williams. But you've got some of these big dudes that Bo Davis liked, and Zion Williams is one of them. So, again, you are so deep at defensive tackle with guys who are going to play. Bro's going to play, McKinley's going to play, Guillory's going to play, Gooden's going to play, Mitchell's going to play, and then you got Washington in front. Like, I don't know. Again, you've got a lot of freshmen at this position as well. I don't know how much they're going to play, but I'm less interested in his role on this team, which I think I know, and more interested in whether or not Kyle Williams wants this type of player. And that's just the reality of the situation, because Kyle's talked about this, and Blake Baker's come on our station and talked about this. Kyle likes disruptors, not space eaters. And Bernard Goodwin's a disruptor. Ahmad Bro's a disruptor. And Zion Williams is a space eater. Like, a guy that weighs 340 pounds is not going to be jackknifing through gaps and making plays 4 yards in the backfield. He's going to be using his strength to reset the line of scrimmage. He can play 2 gaps, but certainly keep the linebackers clean. I'm curious about that. So Zion Williams, a guy that Bo Davis brought in, he's been here since July. We'll see if he can stick in this program and be a useful piece. I think there's certainly a spot for that type of player in football. Just a matter of whether or not Kyle Williams, who knows a lot more about this than I do, prioritizes it. And we'll see with Jacobian Guillory and Sydir Mitchell this year. So that's our Meet the Freshman here on this Thursday. That's hour 1 here on this Thursday. If you missed any of it, catch it on demand wherever you find your sound. Open up talking about the tier list that ESPN put out for college football. LSU solidly in tier 2. Playoff aspirations, but it also shows you just how important that first game is because Clemson's right there with them. You can also hear my sound from Luke Johnson, who's out in Southern California talking Saints. That's at Hunt on Saints. We'll talk a lot of LSU football moving forward. We'll have Matthew Bruni coming on in about 5 minutes, and we'll talk Arkansas with Andrew Hutchinson at the bottom of the hour. Stick with us after national headlines. The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.